Hello and welcome to today's session. I hope you all are healthy. Today we will cover EC2 instance purchase options. If you are hosting your workload in cloud, it's important to understand how to optimize or reduce your infrastructure cost. As of today, AWS supports over 400 types of EC2 instances. When you choose an EC2 instance for your compute requirement, you have to think about the cost the EC2 instance will incur at the end of the month. We all want to achieve our business goals without creating a hole in our pocket. We all want to optimize our IT budget. Today, we will discuss all the pricing options available for EC2 instance and what pricing option you should select based on your use case. As a housekeeping task, I would like to request you, if you are new to our channel or haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to our channel and please click on the bell icon to get premium content. If you appreciate our effort, please like this video. Your support will motivate us. With no further delay, let's get started. Here is a high-level agenda for today's topic. We will start with EC2 purchase options. Then we'll deep dive to every purchase options. Then we'll cover use cases for each options. Then the key attributes. Finally, we'll compare purchase options. And last but not least, we'll see the pricing comparisons. We'll select a scenario and we'll see how pricing can differ based on the options you select. Now let's review the EC2 purchase options. First, on-demand instances, then reserve instances, followed by spot instances, then savings plans, dedicated hosts, dedicated instances, and last but not least, capacity reservations. Now let's deep dive each purchase options one by one. We'll start with on-demand instances. With on-demand instances, you pay for compute capacity by the second with no long-term commitment. You will have full control over its life cycle. You can decide when to launch, when to stop, when to hibernate, when to stop, or when to terminate it. As I mentioned, there is no long-term commitment required when you purchase an on-demand EC2 instance, and you pay only for the second that your on-demand instance is running. Now, when should I choose on-demand EC2 instances? AWS recommend that you select on-demand instances for application with short-term or irregular workloads that cannot be interrupted. That means when you do not have a defined pattern in your workload, you don't know how many days you need the EC2 instances. In that case, on-demand is the perfect solution for you. Now let's see how many on-demand instances you can launch in your account. The current instance limit is measured in terms of number of vCPUs. On-demand instance limit for a AWS account are set on a per region basis, and this limit can change over time. Amazon EC2 is constantly monitoring your uses within each region, and your limits are raised automatically based on your usage pattern. Now if you see, for standard instance class starting with A, C, D, H, I, M, R, T or Z, the default vCPU limits are 1152 vCPUs. If you are selecting for a F, G, P, X type of instances, in that case your default limit will be 128 vCPUs. Now you must be asking, if I need more capacity, what I am going to do? Even though EC2 automatically increases your on-demand instance limit based on your uses, but if you have an use case you need more capacity, you can place a limit increase request and AWS will increase the soft limit for your account. Now, how your instances will be charged? You pay only for the seconds that your on-demand instance are in running state with a 60-second minimum. This is for Linux operating system. If you are choosing Windows, then it will be minimum of 1 hour. Next, let's review reserve instances. With reserve instances, you are committing a consistent amount of uses for a term of 1 or 3 years. The longer the duration you will commit, more savings you will observe. With reserve instances, you can save up to 72% of your EC2 cost compared to on-demand pricing. One thing you have to remember, reserve instances are not physical instances, but rather a billing discount applied on top of your on-demand instance uses. A reserve instance has 4 instance attributes that determines the price. Instance type. For example, M4 large. This is composed of the instance family like M4 and the instance size. Now, if you have a reservation for M4 large, but if you launch M4 extra large, you will not get the reserve instance benefit in some cases. Next, region. The region in which the instance is reserved or the instance reservation is purchased. You will get the billing discount only when you are launching the instance on that same region. Tenancy. Whether your instance run on shared tenancy or dedicated hardware. And next, platform. The operating system also takes a vital role for reserve instance. For example, if you are reserving for a Windows instance, but if you launch a Linux and Unix, that time you will not see any benefit of reserve instances. Next, term commitment. You have an option to commit for either 1 year or 3 years. As I mentioned, the longer the duration you will commit, more savings you will observe. Then payment options. There are 3 different payment options you can opt for. It starts with all upfront. That means full payment is made at the start of the term. You are not paying any additional hours or charge on month-to-month basis. Next, partial upfront. In partial upfront, a portion of the cost must be paid upfront and the remaining amounts will be charged in monthly basis or on equal installments. And third, no upfront. In no upfront, you are not paying anything at the beginning or at the time of purchase, but your billing discounts on an hourly rate or will be added every month. That means every month you are going to pay the remaining amount. And next, the offering class. If your compute needs change, you might be able to modify an existing reserve instance. It depends on the offering class you have selected. Currently, AWS offers 2 different classes. Under standard offering class, you will get the most significant discount. Standard reserve instance can be exchanged. Convertible. Convertible provides a lower discount than standard reserve instances, but you can exchange for another convertible reserve instance with different instance attributes. Convertible reserve instance can also be modified. Now let's see an example how reserve instance work. Let's say you have launched a T2 large instance. You are getting charged on on-demand rate. If you purchase a reserve instance for T2 large, obviously the operating system should be same. Then you will start getting the reserve instance discount. Now let's say you have another one requirement and you need another one EC2 instance. You have purchased a C4 Linux reserve instance, but you have launched a C4 Windows. In that case, for T2 large, you are getting reserve instance discount, but C4 Windows you are paying on-demand rate because your reservation was on C4 Linux. Now, if you launch a C4 Linux, in that case, you are going to get reserve instance discount for both the instances. So you have to understand the reserve instance is solely based on the attributes. If anything is not matching, you will not get that discount. Now let's review the reserve instance scope. When you purchase a reserve instance, you determine the scope of the reserve instance. The scope is either regional or zonal. When you purchase a reserve instance for a region, it's referred to as a regional reserve instance. But when you purchase a reserve instance for a specific availability zone, it's referred to as zonal reserve instance. Now let's review what are the differences. In terms of savings on demand, there is no significant differences. But in terms of reserve capacity, regional reserve instance does not give any capacity reservation. In terms of availability zone flexibility, regional reserve instance provides the availability zone flexibility. That means if you purchase a reserve instance for a region, you will be able to launch in any availability zone, which is not true with zonal, where you are tagged with a particular availability zone. If you want to modify the instance size, regional reserve instance will have the flexibility, not the zonal. And in terms of queuing a purchase, you can queue purchase for a regional reserve instance, not for a zonal reserve instance. Now, let's see the reserve instance quota. That means how many reserve instance you can launch from your account. By default, every account will have 20 per region per month, and in terms of zonal reserve instances, 20 per availability zone per month. Now, how you are getting billed? For example, you have purchased one C4 large reserve instance and you are running 4 C4 large reserve instances concurrently for 1 hour. If you are running all the 4 concurrently, one instance is charged at the basis of reserve instance discount. Other 3 will be charged based on on-demand pricing. If you see this table here, if you purchase one C4 extra large reserve instance and run 4 C4 extra large instances for 15 minutes, one after one, in that case, you are paying only for one reserve instance for the entire hour. Now, what is the use case for reserve instance? First, any production workload with consistent usage for 1 to 3 years. Or if you want to host a production database on EC2. Those are the main use cases for reserve instances. Next, let's review spot instance. A spot instance is an instance that uses spare EC2 capacity that is available for less than on-demand price. Because spot instance enables you to request unused EC2 instances at a steep discount, you can lower your EC2 cost significantly. The hourly price for a spot instance is called a spot price. Now let's see, when should I choose spot instance? If you have a flexible workload that can tolerate interruption, like if you have a high performance computing workload, or maybe if you have a big data analytics workload, or maybe you are doing some CI/CD testing, or maybe you are doing a batch job or containerized workload. Those are the perfect use case for spot. That means your workload can tolerate interruption and it can have a flexible working hours. But if you have a requirement for a constant usage, if your workload cannot tolerate interruption, then spot is not the right choice for you. Now let's review how spot instance work. Maybe you have a variable EC2 workload that can sustain interruption. Maybe you want to do some data analytics workload, or maybe you have a container workload. Now, before running a spot instance, please refer to spot instance best practices. You have to identify which workload is ideal for you. Since you are using spare capacity, AWS can reclaim that instance from you. We'll discuss those points, but let's assume that you understand the use cases where you should use spot instances. Now, go to AWS Management Console. While launching an instance, you can pick the spot instance option, choose all the instance availability zone where you want to work, and after that the important part is you have to understand the interruption behavior, because when AWS will reclaim your instance, what do you want? Do you want to terminate the instance? Do you want to stop it, or do you want to hibernate it? When you choose that interruption behavior, then launch and scale your target capacity. Now let's review EC2 Spot instance benefit. First, cost optimization. This is low predictable prices. Spot instances can save up to 90% compute cost compared to on-demand instances. You can also use EC2 auto scaling to provision capacity across spot and on-demand, reserve instance, or even savings plan instances. We'll discuss savings plan in later slides. Next, massive scale. You can save a lot of money by running hyperscale workload. Maybe you have a requirement of huge amount of EC2 instances, and that is not persistent requirement. Maybe you need for 2 hours or 3 hours. In that case, you can mix your workload with on-demand and spot. As I mentioned, spot will give 90% discount compared to on-demand prices. You will eventually reduce your infrastructure cost irrespective of doing a massive scaling. And third, easy to use. Spot instances may be easily launched, scaled, and managed using AWS service like EC2 Autoscaling and ECS. Also, you can integrate with third-party tools like Terraform or Jenkins. Now let's compare on-demand instance versus spot instance. Now, if you see this bar, if you want savings, then go for spot instances. But if you have a non-interruptive workload, go for on-demand. If you have a non-interruptive workload but you want saving, then you have to choose other option. For non-interruptive workload, spot is not the right choice. Now let's compare both the instances. As I mentioned, on-demand is suitable for irregular or unpredictable workloads, whereas spot is suitable for non-critical, fault-tolerant workloads. On-demand, you pay by hour or second, with a minimum of 60 seconds for Linux, 60 minutes or 1 hour for Windows. In spot, you can get up to 90% savings over on-demand prices. For on-demand, price does not vary. It is static. But for spot instances, price varies based on demand and supply. Now let's understand different pricing scenarios for EC2 Spot and how much you are liable to pay. If AWS stop your instance or terminate your instance in the first instance hour, then you are not going to pay. Scenario 2, if you stop or terminate the instance, then you will be charged close to the second for Linux or close to the hour for Windows. If AWS terminates your instance in the next hour, that means you have already consumed 1 hour and AWS terminates on the next hour, you will be charged close to the second for Linux and close to the hour for the Windows. You will be charged for a complete hour if you are using Windows instance and you are terminating or you stop the instance. One thing you have to understand, Amazon EC2 terminates, stop or hibernate your spot instance when Amazon EC2 needs the capacity back. Amazon EC2 provides a spot instance interruption notice, which gives the instance a 2-minute warning before it is interrupted. If you are using a spot instance and if AWS needs that capacity back, you will get a 2 minutes notice to save your work. Now, based on your instance behavior, it could be terminated, it could be stopped, it could be hibernated. Now, let's understand spot fleet. Spot fleet is a set of spot instances and optionally on-demand instances that is launched based on a criteria that you specify. The spot fleet select the spot capacity pool that meet your need and launches spot instances to meet the target capacity. By default, spot fleets are set to maintain target capacity by launching replacement instance after spot fleet is terminated. If I'll take an example, let's say you have a requirement for 5 EC2 instances. If you have created a spot fleet, maybe you are using 5 spot instances at the beginning. Now, if AWS reclaim 2 instances, then it will automatically launch 2 on-demand instances to maintain the target capacity. So spot fleet is spot instances plus optional on-demand EC2 instances. Let's review savings plan. Savings plan will reduce your EC2 cost by making a commitment to a consistent amount of uses per hour for a term of 1 or 3 years. If you observe the difference in terms of reserve instances, you are not committing on the amount or the dollar value. You are committing on the compute power. In savings plan, you are compute on the dollar value or the uses. Currently, AWS offer 3 types of savings plan. First, compute savings plan, then EC2 savings plan, and third, SageMaker savings plan. Now let's compare each savings plan. If you are selecting compute savings plan, it will be applicable for any EC2 instances, even your AWS Lambda, ECS or AWS Fargate uses. But for instance savings plan, it is only applicable to any EC2 instance uses. On the other hand, if you are selecting SageMaker savings plan, it will be only applicable for your SageMaker uses. Compute savings plan will give up to 66% savings over on-demand pricing. Instance savings plan will give you up to 72% savings over on-demand pricing. But you have to understand, this does not include any Lambda or Fargate or ECS uses. On the other hand, SageMaker will give you up to 60% savings over on-demand pricing, and that is limited to SageMaker uses. You have to understand, savings plan does not apply to spot uses or uses covered by reserve instances. Savings plan offer lower prices compared to on-demand pricing in exchange for a commitment, and you cannot cancel during the time. If you have committed for 1 year, you cannot cancel at the middle of the term. Compute savings plan automatically applies pricing across AWS regions. Now let's review how savings plan work. First, you have to review your usage history. From where you will do, you will go to AWS Cost Explorer. Based on your previous uses, AWS Cost Explorer will give you the recommendations what should be the savings plan you should select and what is the amount you should commit. Because remember, once you commit, you cannot cancel. Now based on that, you select the savings plan. It could be EC2 Instance Savings Plan, it could be Compute Savings Plan, or it could be SageMaker Savings Plan. Then you are giving the commitment. AWS Cost Explorer will give you the amount you should commit. Let's assume that you are committing for $10 per hour. Then you are purchasing the savings plan, and as soon as you will purchase, savings will apply automatically to your specific AWS uses or collection of AWS services based on the savings plan you have purchased. Now let's move to dedicated host. With dedicated host, you are paying for a physical host that is fully dedicated to you. If you have a requirement for per socket, per core, or per VM software license, then dedicated instance is the perfect purchase option for you. In terms of dedicated host feature, you have the visibility of number of sockets and physical cores that support your instances on a dedicated host. You can integrate with AWS License Manager, and you can easily track and manage your software licenses on EC2 dedicated host. You have the option to launch instances onto a specific dedicated host, or you can let Amazon EC2 place the instance automatically. Controlling instance placement will allow you to deploy applications to address licensing, corporate compliance, and regulatory requirements. Then you can run different instance sizes within the same instance family on a dedicated host. Then when should I use dedicated host? As I mentioned during the instance placement control section, if you have corporate compliance or regulatory requirement, then you should go for a dedicated host. Or maybe if you want to bring your own licenses to AWS, maybe you want to host a Windows EC2 or maybe SQL Server, you already have purchased that license from Microsoft. You want to bring that license to AWS, then dedicated host is the option for you. Next, dedicated instance. Now, unlike dedicated host, dedicated instance are Amazon EC2 instance that run in a VPC on a hardware that is dedicated to a single customer. Your dedicated instance are physically isolated at the host hardware level from instances that belong to other AWS accounts. Dedicated instances may share the hardware with other instances from the same AWS account that are not dedicated instance. Now let's review dedicated instance features. First, like normal EC2 instances, you can go for reserve instance. You can go for spot dedicated instance also. You have the option to go for auto scaling. If you have a requirement or if you have a varying workload, then you can go for auto scaling. You can set auto recovery also. Similarly, like normal EC2 instance, you have option for a burstable performance instances. Now, how to launch a dedicated instance? To launch a dedicated instance, you have two options. Either you can create a VPC with tenancy of dedicated, and when you launch an EC2 instance in the dedicated tenancy VPC, the instance will be by default dedicated. The second option could be you can create a VPC with default tenancy, and while launching the EC2 instance, you can manually select the tenancy as dedicated. So to summarize, either you can create a dedicated tenancy VPC. Any instance launched inside that VPC will be dedicated by default, or you can create a default tenancy VPC and manually set the tenancy as dedicated at the time of EC2 launch. Now let's review dedicated host versus dedicated instances. In terms of billing, for dedicated host, you are paying per host. for dedicated instance, you are paying per instance. If you need the capability or the visibility of socket, core, and host ID, then dedicated host will give that capability to you. If you need host affinity, that means consistently deploy your instance onto the same host over and over, then the answer would be dedicated host. Dedicated instance does not give this capability. If you want to determine the instance placement, then dedicated host is the option. But if you need auto recovery capability, then both dedicated host and dedicated instance will support. If you want to bring your own license, dedicated host will support all the license vendor or all the license provider, while dedicated instance does not support every time. Next, capacity reservation. Under capacity reservations, you can reserve capacity for your EC2 instances in a specific availability zone for any duration. Now let's review the pricing. Capacity reservations are charged at the equivalent of on-demand rate whether you run instance in a reserve capacity or not. If you do not use the reservation, this shows up as unused reservation on your EC2 bill. When you run an instance that matches the attribute of the reservation, you just pay for the instance at the rate of on-demand pricing, and there are no upfront or additional charges. Now you can see under capacity reservation, you are paying at the price of on-demand rate. Now you must be thinking, why should I use capacity reservation? If I'll take an example, maybe if you have a workload where you need a huge capacity, maybe thousands or maybe 5,000 EC2 instances. I'm just taking a number. If you are depending on demand, you might not have the capacity required. What you can do, you can reserve the capacity with a duration, and you do not have to commit for 1 year or 3 year duration. You can go for 1 day or even couple of hours. AWS will make that capacity available for you. If I'll take an example about the billing, let's say you have reserved 6 M4 large instances. You may have a workload where you are expecting that you need 6 M4 large instances. When the use case came, you may have used only 4 and 2 M4 large instances are unused. In terms of billing, you will be charged for all 6. But in your EC2 bill, you will say a segregation between used and unused charges. If you have reserved 6 M4 large instances for a specific duration, you will be charged for 6 based on the on-demand pricing. In my example, I have used 4. That is why you can see 40 cents will come under used column and 20 cents will come under unused column. But I'll pay for all 6. Now we are going to do a pricing comparison. We have selected M4 large Linux EC2 instance in US-1 region, and we are assuming that we will run that instance 24/7 for a duration of 1 year. If I will go for on demand, then the charges will be 1 cent per hour. And if you see over the month, I have to pay $73. If I'll go for a year, it will be $876. If I'll go for a spot instance, I'll get 67% discount. The monthly charges will come $24.09. I haven't placed any yearly price because spot is not the ideal use case for a 1 year duration. If I'll go with reserve instance all upfront, there is a one-time payment of $582. I'll not pay anything monthly. If I'll go reserve instance partial upfront, I'll pay one time $297 and then $24.27 per month. At the end of the year, I'll pay $588. From this table, you can understand based on the selection of purchasing option, I'm end up paying different amount although I'm using same virtual CPUs and the RAM and the usage pattern is also same. Now this table is just to give you an idea how your EC2 instance pricing can vary based on the pricing comparison. So based on your use case, please select the pricing option which is appropriate for you and you can see a good discount at the end of the month. Before we conclude today, I would like to request you please subscribe our channel and please click on the bell icon to get notification for premium content. Please do not forget to share this video with your friends and co-workers. If you want me to cover any topic, please provide your request as comment to this video. If you appreciate our effort, please like this video. Your appreciation will motivate us. Thank you again. Please take care and stay safe.